Hey guys, how's it growing? I'm set up before the sun rises, as the sun is rising, at Cynthia Schaefer's house, and I can't wait for you to meet her. She's put together a number of community programs. She has such a big heart. She's very caring and compassionate. We need more people like that.
So she's been broody, so that means she's been sitting for basically 3 weeks, waiting for eggs to hatch.
Cynthia Schaefer is an urban homesteader, and she's going to talk about what that means, as well as some community programs that she's put together.
And now she's got, the other hen is taking turns. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in here. All right, so we've got a newborn. I've been an urban homesteader since about 2013. I really have always loved nature and being with plants. And when I started doing this, it went from having a plant here and a plant there, or maybe just a garden, to it became this entire beautiful system. I didn't do it all at once, I did it in stages. And as I did it, it became more and more addicting and energizing, and you just feel different when you wake up in a place where you're part of the natural system.
So what is that you're doing?
Well, I'm doing elderberry. So this time of year, I'm always doing elderberry. She's one of my favorite medicinals. She's great as an antiviral, and she shortens the duration of colds and flus. Elderberry is a great preventative. I have a lot of healthcare professionals that purchase from me on a regular basis, and they take the tincture every day when they go to work, and it keeps them healthy. As an antiviral, it's going to work in the body to work against that virus before it has the chance to replicate. And it's just an incredible plant. And she planted herself. She just showed up one day. And it's just really peaceful. You know, as humans, we used to be doing these things on a regular basis, shelling beans or always working with our hands. And it's really a mindful practice. And whenever I'm sitting and talking with people, if I have things like this to do, I'll just grab a bunch of pigeon pea and start shelling them, or whatever needs to be done. One of the great things about being in South Florida, this is Asian winged bean, and she produced like mad all last year. She went dormant for part of the winter, and then she came back. So a lot of things you plant once and you have them for a really long time. Comfrey is great in the garden. She's a deep medicinal for broken bones, for sprains. She helps to increase cell turnover, so she's going to heal very rapidly. And she's a great chop and drop. So she's a dynamic accumulator. She's pulling up nutrients from deep within the soil. And when I harvest her, if I'm not using her medicinally, I just chop her up and leave her in the garden. People try to make chop and drop complicated, and it's super simple. And it's part of it is I describe myself as being a really lazy gardener. So when I chop a plant, when I'm trimming, I'm just going to cut it up and leave it right where it lays. And I use the motto, what would the forest do? So in the forest, no one is cleaning up the forest, no one is fertilizing, no one's doing anything. Everything just naturally falls down and becomes part of the next soil cycle. One of the things that's really important when you're homesteading is to know the plants in your area. This plant is Ceda Acuda. It's also known as wireweed. And if you look, it's very different from the Bidens that most people think it is when they first see it. Ceda Acuda is anti-malarial, antibacterial, antiviral. It is high in protein, and it sells for $88 a pound in the herbal shops. It's used a lot for Lyme disease, and it's one of the top herbs in Stephen Buhner's antiviral antibiotics book. And I also like to put root vegetables everywhere because to most people this looks like an ornamental, but it's malanga. My core philosophy really is, what would the forest do? I trust in the system that nature has provided that has been effective for us since the beginning of the planet. And the thing that I really think is important is I think that we don't understand even a reasonable portion of how the system works. And I have seen miracles in my garden because I've let things be and let whatever needs to happen, happen. I lose plants sometimes, and that's okay because I'll either put the plant somewhere else or I'll try a different plant. But the more you work with the system, the more you let the natural intelligence of the natural world do the work for you, the more time you spend harvesting and just enjoying the aliveness and the paradise of nature the way she's meant to function. This is Jackfruit, and she was gifted to me at a plant swap. She was about this high when she got here. And I'm pointing her out because if you'll notice, some of the leaves have been problematic, and the whole plant, all the new leaves were appearing like this. And I treated her homeopathically. And a lot of people haven't embraced homeopathy for plants yet, but it's been really incredible in my yard how I can take things and turn them around with absolutely no impact on the rest of the system. The new growth looks beautiful, so clearly something worked. Urban homesteading is unique in so many ways because in urban homesteading you have a lot of outreach you can do. I live in a great neighborhood. My neighbors are fabulous people who don't mind that my yard does not look like theirs. And I always try to engage the neighbors by offering a taste of this or a taste of that. A lot of my neighbors bring their children and their grandchildren to experience the garden and the butterflies and all the exciting things. And it's also a great opportunity for us to revision the way we live as human beings. There's nothing wrong with having a lawn, but the totality of our food system, as we've seen recently, is being challenged by a lot of different things. Besides the monocropping and the problems with supply chains, there's really a quality issue. And the food that you eat from your own garden or your own neighborhood or your own small region is so much better for your body than anything that you can get in the grocery store. Everglades is the only tomato that I really grow because it grows itself. I planted it once several years ago and it just continues to produce. I've got some of them that are 7 or 8 feet tall and they just go wherever they want. This is Jewels of Opar. It's a nice spinach. When the flowers are open, it's beautiful to just pluck some of those and put those in the salad. And she self-seeds. She comes back every year. So another plant that really takes care of herself. She's really happy underneath moringa, and of course everyone loves moringa. And then the peas over here, every morning I'll just grab the peas and I let them, the things that are going to dry, I just gather them every day and I put them in a pile, and then one day I'll shell them all. There's so much that I wish I had known when I first started. I wish I knew how many things thrived here. I'm really fond of letting plants find a way to work together and solve their own problems. So this is chayote, and she gave me so much fruit this year. And then the main vine died and a second vine came back up. I don't think she's going to fruit a lot this summer, but by fall she'll be full grown and ready to continue to give me tons of fruit. And as long as I don't let her overgrow the canopy of moringa, moringa's perfectly happy to host her. I think the thing that still fascinates me every day is the way that the system takes care of itself. So underground, you've got the mycorrhizal network, and it's transporting resources, and it's moving water, and it's breaking down things so that the plant can uptake it. And it's really funny because in the Facebook group, you can tell who's a new gardener because they see a mushroom in their pot and they get worried that it's a problem, when in fact it's a sign of a super, super healthy system. And then above ground, you have all these chemical signals going on. So a plant in my front yard, if, for example, a tomato hornworm comes in the front yard, that plant will set off a chemical signal to attract the predator for the hornworm. The plants in the backyard, even though they're not under attack, will send off that same signal. And that's why, even though it's really frustrating as a beginning gardener, I always tell people, let the system self-correct. Because if you let it self-correct, then you've solved problems for the long term. One of the things I love about this time of year is the turmeric popping up everywhere. This is blue turmeric, and that's the traditional orange turmeric. You know, when you raise a child, you don't solve all their problems. You encourage them to self-reliance. And I feel the same way about the plants. I want to encourage them to be self-reliant. I get a stronger plant, I get a stronger system, and I happen to believe that the nutrients in the food, because the plant is stronger, are better for me. The second hive is a swarm from the first hive. So the first hive split. We captured the swarm, put it in the second box, but then the first hive did not have a queen. And when they don't have a queen, sometimes they get a worker layer, and the worker layer was laying eggs, so the hive thought that it had a queen. Long story short, my mentor on the beekeeping says he's never seen anyone be able to take a hive with a worker layer and get it to make a queen again, and that hive did that. So it's really like a beautiful relationship with the bees, because when the queen was out and laying, I could feel the difference in the hives just by observing the way the bees were coming in and out. I could see that the bees were happier and things were going better for them. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's a really deep relationship with the bees if you take the time. And I come out here every day and I look at them, and you can tell just by observing how healthy the hive is. And of course, I'm always grateful when I'm able to get honey from them. Everybody hates balsam pear, right? But it's food. And in some cultures, it's called cerasee. And in some cultures, it's highly valued for its medicinal properties. This is quail grass, or Lagos spinach. It's a celosia. It's in the amaranth family, and it's completely edible. The flowers are gorgeous when they get to the full spire, and it self-seeds. So it comes back every year when it's time to eat it. Everyone has different things that they love to do, right? You saw my rain barrels. I don't have those skills. So I engaged community, and people who had those skills came and did the rain barrels. I was able to pay them because I make my living as an herbalist, and I can barter, or I can create, you know, we're still on the monetary system. I think it's really important in urban areas that everyone consider getting a side hustle, you know, doing something that is. Juliet Shore, who's a great economist, calls it acts of self-provisioning. And basically, you know, we used to spend our days doing things that provided us with food, shelter, medicine, and art and entertainment. Those things can still be a rich and valid part of our lives, but instead of being hobbies, they can be ways that we create revenue and things that we can barter. So in an urban area, there's so many opportunities for trade and interaction, and a little bit of more of a specialty in your homesteading. And I also want to say that Homesteading does not necessarily have to be the full chicken bees and have a garden like I do. Homesteading can be as simple as beginning a fermenting business, or jams or jellies, or anything that you want to do that creates self-provisioning for others. So there's a lot of ways that homesteading can start, and you don't have to think about something this extensive because it happens a little bit at a time. It may start with you making some jam from something that a friend gave you from their tree, and maybe you have a pot or two on your balcony, and that is homesteading also. I just want to point out this little weed. It's very distinctive, the seeds, because these little suckers will stick to you. But this is called Guinean Weed, also known as anamu, and I'm going to let you taste it. It has a really strong flavor of garlic, and it finishes with like a really spicy mustard. Mm-hmm. It's being studied in Jamaica for its anti-cancer properties. But in herbalism, we say that the taste tells the tale. And this, with all its sulfites, tells you that it's really good for someone who needs to be warmed up and who needs something that is antibacterial. Of course, I love all my plants equally, but my pride and joy is breadfruit. I don't know if you can see, but there's two there, there's one there, there's just right in this little cluster about 8 or 9 fruits. And she's like that all over the tree. So I will be freeze drying and eating a lot of breadfruit this year, and I'm super excited about that because it's a fabulous fruit. We just announced an initiative called TCC Sprouts. TCC stands for the Caring Community, and it's a nonprofit we do in schools. TCC Sprouts is micro-lending, and it's not a big program. We're going to be loaning out no more than $500 per person. But what we're looking to do is we're looking to help people create those side hustles, whether it's some sort of worm composting or worm casting business, or whether you want to start a rain barrel installation business or compost collection. There's so many possibilities of things that we need as a sustainable urban community, where we need people that are creating these worm castings. We need people doing cottage industry things like fermenting. So for example, a lot of farms and CSAs, and even places like my own property, have greens that are just, we have too many greens and they start to go bad. Somebody can make a business out of fermenting those greens and selling fermented greens. There's a lot of ways that regenerative side hustles could be started and then maybe expanded into main businesses. As the world automates and as we continue to be challenged with these conventional jobs, it would be really beautiful if we could lift more people in our community up to the point where they can have ways of taking care of themselves and their families that are dependent on their own efforts and nothing more. So applications are being taken for mentors for this program, as well as for loans. We'll be announcing an exciting event later on in the summer, and we hope that more and more people just jump into sustainable, regenerative community living, and we live in paradise, and we can all make it paradise for ourselves and our community. This is a sapodilla. What I hope that people take away from this video about me is really nothing about me, but everything about the miracle of nature and the system. We've done a food bank garden together and created this beautiful fresh food going to a local food bank. We're working on a community garden in the town of Davie in one of the local parks. In our community, we have groups of volunteers that go out and pick fruit and take it to a food bank. When we work together, just like when the system works together, we create this harmony and it benefits all of us. So I hope what people take away from this is that Everything that each of us contributes to community, no matter how small or how large, is important. And when we all give what we have to give, we're all exponentially stronger as a community and healthier.
Cynthia is very hardcore when it comes to earth and everything on her, as she put it. I have to admit, I'm not there yet, and that's okay. She and I have a deep mutual respect for each other in spite of the fact that we don't agree with everything, and we have a different approach to pest control. Last winter, I tried her approach with my cucumbers, and I got a decent harvest before the aphids took over. And you know what? It wasn't the end of the world. There's a season and a time for everything under heaven. And you know what? It was a time to pull up those vines and grow something else. I think every gardener will agree that every day in the garden is a learning experience. So we can learn from the garden, but we can also learn from each other, whether we agree with everything or not. As Cynthia mentioned, as an herbalist, she makes and sells tinctures and ghee and other incredible products that are homegrown and homemade. If you got something out of this episode, please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it, and let's grow together.